Shalom everybody, and welcome back to Insights in the Parsha of the Week, Parshat Shemot, which is also the beginning of the period, in this year's case, the 6-week period called Shovavim, where in a sense, on a personal level and on a national level, we feel like we're going back into Egypt, meaning we feel a bit of servitude and constrictions and difficulties, and our goal is to get back out with Hashem. And our main weapon, as usual, is simcha, is being happy and joyous, B'ezrat Hashem. We're going to go into one specific point of the parsha. There's so much in these parshas, so much depth, so many details. There's only so much we can do. But let's try to find some allusions to personal devotion based on the parsha of the week. So we see in chapter 4, verse number 9, that when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to send you to go back to Egypt, and Moshe says, if I say who sends me, what should I say his name is? And Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to push off. And in chapter 4, verse 1, he says like this. Let's take a look at the verse. He says here, Vayan Moshe, after Hashem's telling Moshe to go to Egypt to redeem the Jews, Vayan Moshe vayomer vehen lo yaminu li v'lo yishmu b'koli. Behold, the Jews won't believe me that I was sent by you, and therefore v'lo yishmu b'koli, and they won't listen to my voice that they're going to be redeemed. Ki omru lo nira alecha Hashem, because I say, you didn't see Hashem. Hashem didn't appear to you. So then we see the two tests that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Throw this, what's in your hand, the staff, throw it on the ground. It became a snake, and he fled from the snake. And then the second test, take your hand, put it in your bosom. He took it out and was full of leprosy. Okay? So in verse number 9, after these two signs, and being healed, of course, he said, put your hand back in, and it turns back to be healthy. And to pick up the snake, he picked up the snake, it turned back into a staff. So he says here, Vaya im lo yaminu gam lishne, verse number 8. Vaya im lo yaminu lach. And behold, if they won't believe to you, v'lo yishme'u lekol ha'ot harishon, and they won't listen to the voice. This is the literal translation. The voice of the first sign, which is the throwing of the staff on the ground and it turning into a snake, right? Ve'eminu lekol ha'ot hacharon, then they'll listen to the last sign, the last indication, the last sign, which is the putting your hand in your bosom and it turning leprosy. That they'll listen to you. So we have a few questions. We'll try to answer most of them. Some are so deep we can't yet find a clarification. But if you notice in the pasuk, in the parsha, it says, and it'll be if they don't listen to the voice of the first sign. Number one, since when does a sign have a voice? Number two, the word kol, the voice, is written without the letter vav. Lekal, lamed kuf lamed, as opposed to lamed kuf vav lamed. Lekol, the voice of the first sign. Ot also is written without a vav. And then the second time, ve'eminu lekol ha'ot hacharon, and then they will listen, they'll believe the second sign, the last sign. Lekol, again, is written without a vav. Also, why he's saying first and last? Because afterwards it says, and if they don't listen to these two signs, if they don't believe these two signs, then you throw the water on the earth, it'll turn to blood. So based on that, there's a third sign. So why does he say first and last on the first two? It should be first and then second, Hasheni. Because then afterwards he said, if these two don't work, then throw the water on the ground, it'll turn to blood. Why the language ha'acharon? I won't be able to answer all these questions because it's so deep. At least let's have some footing as to what's going on here. Moshe Rabbeinu, like Rashi says, slandered the Jewish people. He said in verse 1, and behold, hen lo yaminu li, they won't believe me, v'lo yishmu b'koli, and because they won't listen to my voice in coming as your messenger Hashem to tell them that they're leaving Egypt, because they'll say Hashem didn't reveal themselves to you. So Rashi points out this was slander. He was speaking against the Jewish people. Because he said, Hashem was trying to say, Moshe, how do you know they'll talk like that? Moshe Rabbeinu was assuming that the Jews fell in Egypt to such a level of sadness and depression that because there's a blemish in sadness, there's automatically a blemish in emunah. Like Rabbi Nachman teaches many times, emunah and joy work hand in hand. When there's no joy, there's a dent in the emunah. Okay, and also vice versa. When there's a dent in the emunah, there's a dent in one's joy. They work together. A, B, B, A, they work together. So Moshe Rabbeinu assumed the Jews are in bondage. And if they're in bondage, most probably they're sad. They're not happy. And if they're sad, that means they have a blemish in their faith. So who am I talking to? And Hashem was saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, you're wrong. You spoke wrongly. You will see that when I send you, the Jews have hope. And even though the bondage is difficult, they still are holding on to believe there's a Redeemer. And they will come out with you. If it's not all the Jews, because like we know many Jews died in the plague of darkness, but there are still those who are a significant amount of the Jewish people, significant enough to make the continue of the Jewish people to exist after leaving Egypt. And those are the ones who actually left Egypt, and they believed faithfully in Hashem and Moshe his servant. Okay, so Hashem was telling Moshe Rabbeinu, you blemish now in believing that they are sad. And why you, Moshe Rabbeinu, do you believe that? Because by you too, there is a blemish in a dent in your sadness and in your belief. So Hashem had to rebuke Moshe Rabbeinu with two signs close to him. His staff, which he was holding, he threw it on the ground. The staff turned into a snake. This staff was a holy staff. It had engraved in it the initials of the 10 plagues. The 10 plagues correspond to, on a deeper level, the 10 sfirot. The 10 sfirot correspond to the 10 types of melody of song, which, like Rav Noson explains in Likutey Moharan, Hashem initiated in the creation. So by telling Moshe Rabbeinu, throw the staff on the ground, it's going to turn to a snake, he indicated that you too, Moshe Rabbeinu, have a blemish in your faith and in your simcha, and it's going to be indicated in the staff turning into a snake. Okay? Number 2, the hand. The hand is very deep. Rabbi Nachman teaches about the hand. The hand is the keyway, is the gateway between simcha and activating blessings. Blessings, in other words, to have simcha bring about blessing in life, Rabbi Nachman says it's all in the hands. The idea of the hands is the gateway between the potential of the joy and what it leads to, the actuality of the blessings that it activates. So by Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu, take your hand, put it in your bosom, becomes leprosy. A leprous hand indicates a hand that's not doing its task. It's not doing the job of activating brachot. Rabbi Nachman teaches the hands are blessings, which is indicated when the Kohanim bless the Jewish people, they have to raise their hands. It has to be birkat. The blessing of the Kohen is the Vayisa Yado Aaron et Yadav El Ha'am Vayvarachem. Aaron raised his hands to the Jewish people and blessed them. The idea of hands, Rabbi Nachman teaches, is the key for blessing. But for the hands to work, it's based on a prerequisite of joy and emunah. So here on the second one, Hashem indicated to Moshe Rabbeinu, you blemished on deeper level your hands. Fine, the staff, which is the root, it has on it engraved the 10 plagues corresponding to the rectification done by the 10 types of melody, the 10 sfirot, the 10 utterances. It's number 10, which repeats itself many times in Judaism, in the Torah. Okay? That is the blemish from the beginning of creation that you've blemished in. So you have to let go of the staff. You are holding the staff as if to indicate that you have a stronghold and a grip on the root of the 10 types of melody. But now I'm telling you to let go, put it on the ground, and it turns to a snake. The snake is the epitome of sadness, because the whole jealousy of the primordial snake, which all snakes now take representation from. That's why all snakes crawl they crawl and they have no arms, no legs, because of the primordial snake who was jealous of Adam when Chava, and that jealousy was an indication that he had sadness. He wasn't happy in his portion, because if not, what are you jealous about? So the snake is the epitome of sadness. That's why the staff turned into a snake to show Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't have a grasp in this. You don't have a hold, because now you yourself have a dent in believing and doubting the status of the Jewish people, finding the good points. You, Moshe Rabbeinu, more than anybody else, you're a leader. You're supposed to be. You're a shepherd, showing you know how to take care and to take care and have compassion on others. That's why I'm choosing you, Moshe Rabbeinu, to go back to Egypt. Okay? And now you're showing an indication that you're not full in that. I have to rebuke you in order to rectify you. Okay? So that was the indication of the first sign of the staff turning into a snake. And now his hand, himself, the tzaddik himself, Moshe Rabbeinu, his hand being blemished, showing you blemish the hands, which is the gateway between simcha and what it leads to, which is the blessings activated by the hands. Okay? So now both of them in the Torah are written without the letter Vav, Kol. If they don't listen to the voice of the first one, because they say, okay, it's still not a proof, because who are you, Moshe Rabbeinu? So then you add a second one. I myself am suffering, my hand. The staff turning to the snake, that's external. That's the root of creation represented in the 10 plagues indicated in the staff. Okay, that's the creation in general. But Moshe Rabbeinu says it's not enough. Okay, look at me. My hand is turning to leprosy because of you, because I spoke against you, because I couldn't find that there's good inside of you. And now I'm being meant to show that there is hope in the Jewish people to bring you out of Egypt, because there's still emunah and there's still simcha in the Jewish people. Okay? So with these two signs, also the second one is spelled in the Torah without the letter Vav. Kol without the letter Vav. What's the idea of Kol without the letter Vav? That goes back to what Isaac said to Jacob. Hakol kol Yaakov vayadayim yedei Esav. Isaac was blind and he was about to give the blessings to Jacob instead of Esav. So and Rivka dressed up Yaakov in the furs of Esav, so he should be hairy like Esav. So Yitzchak was skeptical if this was actually Esav he's giving the blessing to. He says, "Come close, let me feel you, my son." And he says the kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esav. So Noson explains that in the Torah, the first kol, the voice is the voice. Kol Yaakov. The first kol is written without the letter Vav, like Hakal, Hey Kuf Lamed. And the second voice is written full, Kuf Vav Lamed. Rav Noson explains that the voice of Jacob has two parts. There's a times in life where you have to cry out to Hashem. You have no choice. You're being squeezed from all the corners, and it's very difficult, and you don't see clarity, you don't see a way out. So the traditional way, you have to call out to Hashem. But that is not the final goal. The final goal is, after crying out to Hashem, finding an opening, and then rejoicing and calling out to Hashem in joy, in thanksgiving, in song, in blessings, in praising. Okay, that's the real Kol Yaakov. Yaakov has two voices. The first one, which is the first stepping stone, the initial stage, is Hey Kuf Lamed. Hakol Kal, without the letter Vav, meaning an incomplete voice. Because Kolot, there are 5 voices of joy, like we say in the blessings of a wedding. And it's indicated in the verse in Isaiah, Kol Sason, Kol Simcha, Kol Chatan, Kol Kala, Kol Omim Hodu L'Hashem Kitov. The 5 voices of joy. The voice of a Chatan, the voice of a Kala, call of singing, call of rejoicing, the voice of those who are giving thanks to Hashem. So Kolot are associated with joyous expression. So the verse, Isaac is telling Jacob, what is Yaakov? Yaakov, Kol Yaakov. Yaakov, his thing is the voice. And it's true. There's 2 times. Not all life is fine and dandy. There's a times in life, in the day. Minimum though, initial stage, first stepping stone is you got to call to Hashem. You got to cry to Hashem when things are difficult. You cry and help me, Hashem. And you're in a panic. You're in a worry. So you cry to Hashem because you're being squeezed. But that's supposed to lead to the real voice of Jacob, which is Kuf Vav Lamed, the second call, which is the voice of rejoicing. A call Yaakov. Esav, the hands are Esav. Esav's thing is this world, trying to deal with this world with the hands and get involved. Blemished hands. Okay, Adaim Yedei Esav. So now here, the back to our parsha, the 2 otot have voices. If they don't listen to the voice of the first sign, it's written lacking without the letter Vav. Going back to the call of Yaakov, the first one. And also the second call here, the second sign, also is called Kol ha'ot hasheni, because both of them are indicators. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people that I paid the price. I spoke against you, and here is the result. In other words, I have a blemish in my own faith and simcha, and that's reflected in the staff turning into a snake, and also my hand, which is on my personal level, is being blemished. When they see Moshe Rabbeinu is admitting to his falling, and yet it's being healed, he puts his hand back into the bosom and it's healed. He picks up the snake, it turns back again to a staff. So they see that there's hope. Moshe Rabbeinu has rectified himself, and now he's able to help us also to come out. So this is a type of an indication of why kol. Now, on a deeper level, we can't go that deep because this is really, there's still a lot of questions behind. The number 130 appears a lot regarding Egypt. 130 are the years, like we mentioned in previous classes, the years that Adam separated from Chava until he had the third son, which is Shet, right? Seth. There was Cain, Hevel, and then there was Seth, Shet. And between the period between having Cain and Hevel and Shet was 130 years waiting period, because Adam separated from his wife because he thought that he brought destruction upon the world. The Zohar says that in those 130 years, Adam had, at his high level, he was an outstanding tzaddik, he had wasted seed in his 130 years. And the sparks of those wasted seed ended up being in Egypt. And that's why the Jews had to go down to Egypt in order to rectify those 130 years of wasted seed. So that's 130, first time. Second time we see 130 is the age Jacob came down to Egypt. And he told Paro, my years are 130 bad years. Why does Yaakov call his years, first 130 years of his 147 lifespan? The last 17 years were in Egypt, and those are the best years of his life. But they were preceded by 130 years of difficulty, he calls them bad. Because Yaakov's mission was also to begin the rectification of the 130 years of Adam Arishon. Number 3, Moshe Rabbeinu was born when his mother Yocheved was 130. He was born when she turned 130. That's when he was born, Moshe Rabbeinu, okay? So this number 130, which is Gematria Kuf Lamed, Kal, Kol, Kal, whatever you want to say, that's the same Gematria here. And it's to fix that damage. It's interesting to note, the word damage in Hebrew is kalkel, lekalkel, which is twice Kuf Lamed, Kuf Lamed. It could be an indication, number 1, to Adam's difficulty in 130 years, and number 2, Yaakov's initial difficulty of his 130 years, but both being fixed by Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu had 2 signs. Kol ha'ot harishon, Kuf Lamed, the voice of the first sign of him throwing the staff down, showing that he's indicating that there is a dent in the emunah of the beginning of creation, which relates to Adam's time. So that's the idea of the first ot. And then the second ot is regarding Yaakov. Okay, Yaakov fixing the hands of Esav. So Moshe Rabbeinu's hand became leprosy, showing that there's a blemish in the hands of the hands of bracha, the hands due to simcha, which activate bracha and joy. So these are the 2 kolot that Moshe Rabbeinu had to rectify. So this is an indication of why it's written Kuf Lamed without the vav in the pasuk. Okay, and Rishon and Acharon, because the beginning and end, Adam and Yaakov, both beginning point and technically end point is Yaakov Avinu in this sense, because Moshe Rabbeinu comes to build up the final rectification. We know, just to explain, Yaakov's face, his image, is on the heavenly throne. The Merkava has the Pnei Yaakov. We are called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Yaakov is the goal here. So because of that, the second sign of that Moshe Rabbeinu showed the Jews is called the last one. It's not technically the last one. It should be the second one. It's called the last, to show that both first and second are first and last, to fix Adam Arishon and also to fix Yaakov. The idea to have fixed 130 years of Adam and the initial 130 years of Yaakov, which were difficult, which didn't reach the total rectification until the Jews entered Egypt. That's why Yaakov said, my 17 years are good now. What do you mean good? You're in Egypt, you left Eretz Yisrael, now it's good? It's good for Yaakov because now the Jewish people will be here to rectify the 130 years of Adam that I tried working on my first 130 years. So now is beginning the rectification in Egypt. So that's why Yaakov technically had 17 good years. 17, by the way, is Gematria Tov, which means good. So the bottom line point is, as again we see again and again and again, how simcha and the lack of simcha play a major role in exile and redemption. Exile is sadness, and everything happening is a byproduct of a lack of happiness. When there's atzvut, that leads to a blemish in emunah, a blemish in fear of heaven, and a blemish in conduct, sinning, transgressions. All these are byproducts of a lack of simcha, okay? And the geulah is through simcha, B'ezrat Hashem. So we see this coming up again and again in the Parshiot. The goal is to serve Hashem with joy. The goal of everything, the final goal of everything, even the final goal of the Zohar says that the whole reason of creation is that Hashem should be made known in the world. Hashem's, like the Zohar says, Hashem's goodness, His kindness should be known in the world. So you ask yourself, for what? Okay, I recognize the kindness and goodness of Hashem. What does that do to me? It elates you, it elevates you, it brings you to a feeling of joy. So here we come again and again and again, how basically the fundamental point of all life, of all Judaism, of emunah itself, is being happy, being positive, being confident that Hashem loves you and there's a purpose and mission for you in life, and there's always, always hope. That itself should trigger enough simcha that we should come out. One tiny thing, I remember there was a comic edition of the story of the Exodus and the exile in Egypt. And in the comics series, when trying to illustrate how the Jews were, when Paro was making decrees in order to decrease the population of the Jewish people. So the verse says, as much as Paro, this week's Parsha, as much as Paro tried to diminish the population of the Jews, ken yirbeh, veken yifrotz, the Jews were multiplying like crazy. There were shisha bekers achad. The woman gave birth to 6 children at one shot. That's why the Jews became so many. One opinion says there were 50 million Jews in Egypt before they left, and only like 1/50th of them left. Actually, the other 49 million died in Egypt. But whatever the opinions, it's a crazy amount of Jews who were living in Egypt. That's why the Egyptians were scared. They're going to take over. Pen year bim, unless they become so fruitful and they take over the country. So in the comic, they indicated, how the Jews were struggling with the bondage and the slavery, and then the father came home and his wife just gave birth to 6 children, and in the comics you see her smiling and he's smiling with the cute little babies that just they're born. So the message the comic was trying to give to the child who's reading the comic illustration is that the Jews were trying to be happy. How do you procreate under such difficulties? Yet they were happy. Also, what the Midrash says, that the husbands were so broken because it was avodat parech. That this week's parsha, that Paro wanted to break the spirit of the Jews, to break their morale. So the woman would come while the Jewish men had a break. They would sit under like apple trees. Tachat tapuach orar ticha. That's the pasuk from Song of Songs. Under the apple tree, the woman would come to wash their husbands, give them food to eat, and make them happy, to give them simcha. And also they would make themselves attractive in order for the husbands to be happy and to want to be with their wives and have children, B'ezrat Hashem. So you see, simcha was a major role in the continuity of the Jewish people in Egypt. That's how they kept on going. And that is what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Don't speak bad against the Jews. Don't say they won't believe you. They will believe you. Why? Because there's still a modicum trace of emunah and simcha in the Jewish people. So too now, our main weapon now before Mashiach comes is simcha and emunah. Okay? You can have everything in life. You can have Torah, study and everything, but if there's no simcha and emunah, you're on the way down. But whereas a person has simcha and emunah, even a Jew is not so religious, but if he builds a foundation on simcha and emunah as he is, he will eventually come back to Hashem, B'ezrat Hashem. He'll find that the only way these things work, simcha and emunah, is if it's in line with the Creator, it's in line with the eternal purpose of life, because this world itself is just vanity, nothing to be happy about, nothing to believe in. But when a person, as he is, starts with a little bit of emunah and simcha and works on it, this is his way out of his personal Egypt, his personal exile. Shabbat Shalom, and only good.